if you're going to go for impossible goals, if you're going to go for big goals, most people in your life will not think you can do it. Most people, if I told them back when I was in school that I wanted to be a professional author and I wanted to write all these books, most people would have said you can't do that, because most people didn't believe in me like I believed in my own self. Is that when you have a future self that's 10 times bigger, meaning it feels impossible, that makes life easier than if you have a future self that's only 2 times or only a little bit different. You want a 10 times bigger future self, and I'm going to explain in a second why 10 times is actually easier than going for just small 2 times.
내가 원하는 목표가 있더라도 현실은 매우 불확실하고 상황이 계속 바뀌기 마련입니다. 내가 제어할 수 없는 환경 변수들이 존재하기에 현재 내가 하는 일에 충실히 열심히 살면 그 상황에 맞는 긍정적인 미래가 저절로 열린다는 생각은 어떻게 생각하시는지요? 그리고 10배 목표를 세우니까 너무 막연하게 느껴지는데 실현 가능한 계획을 세우는 노하우가 있을까요? 이렇게 질문을 주셨습니다.
That question was very beautiful. So that question was talking about how the environment is always changing and about just how there's so many different variables. And what I want to say is that this is why you don't want to use the present as the foundation for the future, because the present is always changing and there's so many things that are outside of your control. This is why you want to let your future be the basis for the choices you make now, is because there is a lot of things that are always changing in the present. And so you want to let your future, which is actually the future is a lot more stable. Your future is what you want to use as the thing that determines your decisions, not the environment, not all the things that change. There's a lot of things that are changing. The economy is changing. So you don't want to let the present determine what you do in the future. You want to get really clear on your future and let your future determine what you do in the present. If you let the present determine the future, usually you will lose hope, because the present is very complicated, and even the present can sometimes look pretty rough. The present can be very challenging. And so you don't want to let the present determine the future, because then sometimes you will lose hope. So I'm going to now explain, and I'm going to show you a picture. So here's what I want to say. This book is called 10x, or 10 times is easier than 2 times. What this book is, and I'm just going to explain it very simply, is that when you have a future self that's 10 times bigger, meaning it feels impossible, that makes life easier than if you have a future self that's only 2 times or only a little bit different. You want a 10 times bigger future self, and I'm going to explain in a second why 10 times is actually easier than going for just small 2 times. So there's a very famous economic law, very famous. It's called the 80-20 principle, 80-20 principle. And what it means is that 80% of your success comes from just 20% of what you do. So what this means is that very few things that you do as a person, very few people, there's very few things in your life that are creating almost all of the success. And what that means is that the rest of the things in your life, the other 80% of things in your life, are almost they're not helping you. They're not moving you forward. So this side right here is what we call the 2x mindset. What this means is that you're going for 2x, meaning you're going for double. You're trying to do more of what you're already doing. So for me, for example, that would be like me trying to double my book sales. Or it could be you just trying to, it doesn't always have to be exactly 2 times, but what it mostly means is that this is the side, 2x, means you're just trying to double or do more of what you're already doing. Basically, what we're saying here is if you're going to go for 2x, like if you're a business owner, or if you're someone who's trying to go for 2 times, you can keep 80% of what you're doing right now. You can keep 80% of your habits. You can keep 80% of your clients. You can keep 80% of your behaviors. You can keep 80% of who you are if you're going to go for 2x. So if you're going for 2x of anything, for me, for example, if I want to double the amount of books I sell, I can keep 80% of who I am now, and 80% of what I'm doing is all I have to change is 20%. Maybe I change a few things. Maybe I, make a new product or work a little harder. To go for 2x, you only change 20%, but you keep the 80. However, if you're going to go for 10 times, and this is what I was talking about, if you're going to go for a massive goal, an impossible goal, if you're going to go for something really, really big, then what that means is that you can only keep the best 20% of what you're doing. And I'm gonna share with you a simple example of my son Caleb, who plays tennis. But if you're gonna go for something really, really big, a big future self, an impossible future self, then what that means is that that future is going to require you to let go, to stop doing 80% of what you're now doing. 80% of what you're now doing has to go if you're gonna go for a big future. So let me give an example. This is my son Caleb, and this is him. He's a tennis player. He's in high school tennis. His goal is to play college tennis here in America. His coach asked him the question. His coach, one time we were talking to his coach, and his coach said, Caleb, why isn't your goal to go for pro? Why don't you want to be a pro tennis player? So where we live in Orlando, Florida, and tennis is a really big deal here. And so this is where I'm going to just explain the idea. But if he wants to go for college, there are literally hundreds and hundreds of pathways for him to get to a college. He could play for high school. There's hundreds of different coaches who could get him to the college level. But if he wants to go for pro, there's not very many paths. There might be one or two coaches who could get him there. And if he really wants to go pro, he can't keep doing a lot of what he's now doing. Only a few paths will get him to the pro or to the 10x goal. If you're going to go for 2x or for, let's just say if you're going to go for a small future self, what that means is 2x means you're taking the present and you're using that to create the future. So this just means that you're not thinking big about the future. You're letting the present determine what your future is. It's really, really important to realize that the future, as well as the past, are simply tools. It's a tool. So having a big future is simply a tool to help you make decisions in the present. So if my son Caleb goes for a future that's college, like the college goal, the small goal, that goal makes the present very confusing because there's too many possible pathways to get him to the college goal. So I'm going to go back to my son Caleb as an example. If he's thinking about his future self and he thinks about going to college, that view of the future isn't helpful in the present. The reason that goal, that future self, is not useful is because it doesn't force him or me as his dad, it doesn't force us to really look in the present at what would be the best path. But if he made his future self much, much bigger, like, for example, going for pro, which is an impossible goal, that's useful because that goal allows us in the present to really think about what's the best path for him, what would really help him move forward. So let me give myself as an example. When I was going to school, I really wanted to be an author. I really wanted to write books. So a small goal would be that my future self could have just been an author. I could have just been someone who writes books, but I made the goal much bigger, impossible, say 10x bigger. And rather than just saying I wanted to be an author, I said, I want to get a 6-figure book deal. I wanted to get a big book deal with one of the major publishers. And that's the goal that shaped who I was and what I did. So I went for not a 2x goal or not a small goal of just writing a book. I was like, I want to get a big book deal from one of the major publishers. And that was a much bigger future self. So whatever your view of your future is, whether it's small or big, your future is going to determine what you do and who you are in the present. Having much bigger goals, like me, for example, wanting a 6-figure book deal, much bigger goals force you in the present to make much more thoughtful decisions and to realize that most things won't get you there. It's like my son with tennis. If he really wants to go pro, most things won't get him there. And so it forces you to be a lot more thoughtful in the present about which pathways you will take. One last thing I'll say here, and then we'll go to the next question. If you're going to go for impossible goals, if you're going to go for big goals, most people in your life will not think you can do it. Most people, if I told them back when I was in school that I wanted to be a professional author and I wanted to write all these books, most people would have said you can't do that, because most people didn't believe in me like I believed in my own self. Who I am now, I have goals right now that no one else would believe I can achieve but me. No one, if I told someone, my friends, my family about my future self, they wouldn't be able to agree. Not that it really matters, but they don't see it. And so what I'm saying is most people don't see your future self because they're looking at your current and your past self. This is why your future self is between you and you. And so I guess the final thing I'll just say here is that it's okay if other people don't see it. One of my favorite quotes is, "What other people think about you is none of your business." And so it's okay if your future self seems impossible to other people. It's your future that determines who you are in the present, but most people are going to judge you based on your present self and based on your past self, and that's okay. But also, knowing that people can change, I would just caution, try not to judge other people so much based on their current self, because other people, their future self could be massively different than you expect, and you might misjudge them thinking that that's just who they are and that that's who they're always going to be. I've done this before where I've thought, oh, that person's like, I've judged them that way, and then a couple years goes by and they're doing amazing things, and I was like, oh wow, I was judging them on their current self, but their future self was in a totally different place.
10배가 2배보다 쉽다를 설명해 주실 때 보여주신 그림에 대해 궁금한 게 있습니다. 10배 성장을 목표로 잡으면 80%의 기존 방식을 버리고 새로운 80%를 시도해야 하는데 새로운 방법을 쓰는 것에 저항감이 많이 들어 힘들어하는 사람들에게 해주실 조언이 있으실까요? 이 질문을 마지막으로 오늘 하도록 하겠습니다.
Such a beautiful question. Such a beautiful question. Will you actually just say that that is a beautiful question? So, as we've talked about, if you let the present create the future, then the future is going to look a lot like the present. Will you say that? I'm going to talk about this in steps. So share that part. If you let the present shape the future, then the future is going to look a lot like the present. You do not want the present to shape the future. Instead, you want the future to shape the present. Then that future helps you to see the few things that matter. But you can't know the few things that matter, say the 20%, you can't know that unless you're doing it from the future. The future is what determines where you focus. The future is also what determines what you have to let go. So let me give an example and then just say that this is this is why I said all progress starts by telling the truth. So I'm going to give an example. So when you start to think about your future self, say 3 years away, and it's an impossible future self. It's a big goal, future self. So when you start thinking about your future self and imagining your future self, then you want that big future self to kind of point the light on your current life. You want the future self to be the way you look at your life right now. And that's when you have to say, a lot of what I'm doing right now, a lot of what I'm spending my time on isn't going to get me there. So when you're thinking about this, the future self you want to be, and you think about what are the 3 priorities, right? The 3 big areas where I want to go 10x, you could say. What are the 3 areas where I want my future self to be at an amazing place? That's your vision. So this right here, this 20%, this represents the few areas where you want to put all of your focus. The more you can put your focus on these few areas, the bigger the progress you will make. Yeah, so basically this idea of the 20%, this is just the idea that there are a few things that if you really focus on them and if you get really good at them, your life will go very far. But you have to think very thoughtfully about what are the few things that if I really focus on it, and if I get really, really good at this, my future self is going to be 10 times bigger. So I'm going to give an example. And I will say this is hard. It is hard, but it makes your life easier. It's harder in the short run, because it's hard to let go of things that we think we need. So that whole idea of the 80% of things, those are the things that you think you need, but you don't want. They may even be things that are good. There are things that are, the things in the 80%, some of them might be bad habits, right? Some of them might be bad habits or even people that hold you back. But some of those things actually might be really good, but they're stopping you from being really great. There's a really important kind of idea. It says that good is the enemy of great. So the 80% of things, so first off, it's your future self. Your future self, who you want to be, is what determines the path. And the path is that 20%. The path is the few things and the relationships that you really want to go big. It's your future self that determines where you focus. But also your future self is what determines what you let go of. The things that got you here, but won't get you there. So what I'm calling the 80%, that's your old self. That's your past self. It might even be your past friends. It might be your past habits, but that's your old self. Your future self is your new self inviting you to a much better place. And when you let go, when you start letting go, you don't have to let go. By the way, and it's not even a good idea. Don't let go of all of it at once. Like, you let go of it a bit at a time. And I'll explain, but you let go of things. That's why you do it every 90 days. Every 90 days, you can let go of a few things and focus more on your future self. So you don't let it all go all at once. You let it go a bit at a time. I'll give a quick example. So in the book Future Self, I actually started with the story of Mr. Beast. Mr. Beast is a big YouTuber. He makes great YouTube videos. They've been like, he's the biggest YouTuber in the world. So what Mr. Beast talked about is, he said when he first started, he did everything. He filmed his videos, he edited his videos, he did every single thing with making the videos. But when he really wanted to start becoming big and amazing, he had to let go of certain things, and he had to actually let someone else do it. He had to let someone else edit the videos, so that he could focus on making the videos really good and let someone else do some of the other parts so that the videos could get really good. So sometimes you need teamwork where you actually have a team, but sometimes you've got to just let things go. You got to say, it might be a job, or it might be a group of friends, right? Or it might even be activities like social media or stuff like that. There might be certain things or people that you just have to say, that doesn't fit with my future self. So I'm gonna let that stuff go and focus my attention where I really want to make progress. Because wherever you focus, that's where you're going to make progress. This is super important. There's a really good quote that says that 90% of the good, 90% of being good is about avoiding bad. So what I mean by that is, really, the biggest part about becoming your future self, aside from choosing your future self, is just letting go of the stuff that's not going to get you there. That's the biggest part, is when you think about your future self, being honest about what are all the things, that 80% of things that I'm now doing, spending my time and energy on, that aren't going to get me there. That's the biggest part, is learning to let those go and just being honest about letting those go. Letting those things go, whether it's friends, habits, even over time, it could be a job. I actually just barely let go of my coaching program. I had a coaching program where I coach people, but it didn't fit with my future self, and so I stopped doing it. Even though it was really great. It was enjoyable. I made a lot of money doing it, but I knew if I kept doing it, then I wouldn't be able to really become my next future self. This is my favorite way to think about it. You really want your future to be a filter. Your future is the filter which determines what you say yes to and what you say no to. And when you have a really, really big future, then the filter gets rid of a lot. Like, most things get filtered out. Most people get filtered out. Most things get filtered out when you have a really big future. And that's why it's powerful. You want a really clean, big filter so that you say no to almost everything. And when you start, and by the way, this stuff is all things, people, situations that they're good, they're okay, but they're stopping you from focusing on the things that are much better. If you focused on these things, which are much better, you get much more value out of your time and out of your relationships. And so if you stop doing these things, the 80% of things, if you let those things go, then you're letting go of your old self so that you can actually become something much more than you think you can. And you really can. You can become much more than you think you can if you let go of the things you're holding on to right now. That could be friends, it could be situations, people, and you really want to make decisions based on the future self that you want. The quality of your time is based on the quality of what you pay attention to. And if you're thinking about and paying attention to a lot of different things that are not that powerful, then your time and your future self are not going to be what they could be. One last thing here is just that your future self is between you and you. And so even if, like, you may love a lot of what you're doing, right? You may love where you're focused, and that's good. That's fine. That's between you and you. And so this is why you got to be really connected with your own future self and what you value. As an example, I have someone who works for me, and she's an amazing person. She was really thinking about going to graduate school, but based on her life right now, based on, she's a mom, she's got lots of kids, and she just decided, I'm going to let that go. I'm going to let go of the goal to go to graduate school because I feel like for me, my future self, the areas where I want to focus and put my time and energy, this is worth more than going to school. And so she let that goal go because she decided that there were things that mattered more to her. There were things that she cared about more and things that she wanted more. And so sometimes you have to let go of things that you thought you wanted because now you see that there's something that's even better that you can focus on. I just love this question because this is what I think about all the time is letting go of the past self. The thing that I'll say here is that the hardest part about it is disappointing the people who don't want you to change. That's the hardest part. The hardest part is that you're going to disappoint people when you start going for your future self. You'll have to disappoint, maybe like if you decide to, leave a job, you might have to disappoint some people. Or, for me, I stopped doing that coaching program. I had to disappoint some people because they wanted me to keep doing that. Or maybe you stop hanging out with certain friends, right? They might think, why are you doing this, right? So the hardest part about this, and it's what stops people, is that you will disappoint people when you start going for your future self. And that's not their fault, and it's not your fault. It's okay that they feel that way. It's okay that, but you can't live your life trying to be what other people want you to be. Like, you got to be true to what you value and making progress, and you will disappoint some people along the way. You really will. And every time you do it, you'll disappoint people. Last thought is, but by disappointing certain people, which is okay, it's understandable. By disappointing, you're going to be focusing on something that you really think is what's important. And by doing that, you will also be helping a lot of other people in a different way. For example, I might be letting go of that coaching program and I might disappoint those people, but instead I'm going to put my time into writing the next book. And even though I'm disappointing these people, which is okay, I understand, I'm also helping the people that I feel I can now help. And so even though you will disappoint some people, you'll also be putting your energy and effort where you feel you can make the biggest impact, or where you feel like it's the most important area to focus. Guys, I just wanted to say, I loved being with you guys. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your time. Genuinely, I just want to say thank you, and I hope that this was useful for you.